Hey tea sippers, welcome to Clock the Tea with Dr. Long. This is your host, Mark Long, coming at you from the Midwest. I am going to bring you a variety of topics today, so go ahead and find that coffee, find that tea, find that Crystal Light, hell, find that water, because we all need a little bit of that in our lives. Now, today we're going to dive into a little bit of politics, some reality TV. We're also going to discuss the holidays and talk a little bit about getting older and what isolation looks like for them. Stay tuned, let's get into that tea. Hello. I want to talk about, aging and isolation and what comes along with that. And, middle adulthood comes with a mix of reality checks and unexpected wins, obviously with more financial success and just kind of more maturity, right? But many of us discovered that, what we imagined was more of a linear success, constant momentum, that kind of thing, gives way to something richer, which is what a lot of people don't really talk about, which is the confidence that you get with lived experience, the more clarity that you get from hard-won victories and boundaries that you set with people, and a deepened self-acceptance that you get, that you don't chase for external validation as much as you used to as you age. So those shifts aren't abstractions. They show up in how we choose work, how we choose our relationships, how we rest, and how we, claim our time without having to apologize to others. So there's a lot of expectation versus reality, that I had of getting older, and plans evolve, priorities shift. What once felt urgent often becomes optional, right? And what's essential, like health and connection and purpose, moves to center stage, especially things like connection and health. You really start to see the importance of those two things. But most importantly, a lot of people who have so much connection start to understand that a lot of people who, as they get older, within their vast connections, also tend to start develop more deep connections with those who are more intermediate and directly associated with them in their lives. So you start to move out of close friendships, right, and start to move into the acquaintance area with a lot of people. And that's just a part of, the boundaries that you set, but also is about that optional ability to give into what you will allow. So some surprising joys, I would say, getting older would be, as I touched on earlier, would be the confidence. You start to trust your judgment because it's been tested before. And that comes with a lot of practice, right? Of learning from those mistakes or those wins and kind of applying to how to respond to them in the future or how to carry ourselves in the moment. Mental health comes into play with that. How you take care of yourself mentally shows up, and things show up in your 30s and 40s that if you haven't started working on those things in terms of building your confidence, you're going to still show up that way. Self-acceptance has been a surprising joy as well. So I think you just stop outsourcing your worth and you start making your inner critic lose its job as much, and you start to relax into, what gets better with age. Just like people talk about wine, right? It's wisdom and its longevity creates better flavor, better taste. That's what happens with age. And I think that's what happens with when it comes to starting to feel more confident, and when it comes to start to build your own tribe of those who you want to keep around you. I want to dive into the not so pretty parts of aging. So isolation, right? There's a lot of talk about how isolation impacts a lot of communities, not just those who are getting older, but isolation in adults is common, but it's not inevitable, right? So a lot of prevalence in regards to this in the CDC, what they have noticed in 2025. And what recent national surveys show is that sustained mental health challenges among adults, including depression and anxiety, underscores why isolation can creep in midlife out of nowhere. And the report says about 1 in 5 U.S. adults with depression and NHIS early releases show notable rates of regular anxiety and depression symptoms among adults. So what that means is that we're starting to see a little bit more pronounced facts and more pronounced reporting of those who are feeling isolated and depressed among adults. And while those numbers aren't really changing, but getting a little bit worse for younger adults and those in high school, for adults, we're just starting to see more reporting of it, which is actually good for those people becoming more aware of their mental health. So, some of those contributing factors to some of that isolation and depression that a lot of adults are willing to speak on now is the economic stress. So, things that are happening in the economy, things cost more. Caregiving, as people are living longer, there is more responsibility with those that we have to care for, staying around longer. So we're starting to see more health changes, more health challenges. We also, as adults, see identity-based marginalization, and people and adults have reported that this can amplify isolation risk because none of these factors are pretty much something that everyone will experience, but community conditions, where we live, where we work, how we're accepted within our communities, all play actionable levers in regards to mental health and mental well-being. So we are starting to see a lot of adults report isolation based on that. When it comes to community ties, we know that neighborhood groups, faith communities, alumni circles, mutual aids, other touch points of communities kind of serve as a buffer to that stress and can decrease some of those loneliness feelings, especially in places where a lot of senior centers exist. Middle-aged adults can typically lean towards more companionship, especially if you are a household without children. You can lean towards pets. If you prefer that, pets can help increase daily structure and promote routines, such as having outdoor time with them or giving more responsibilities to yourself to kind of help lift your mood by having more pets. Some other creative outlets for those who are experiencing isolation could be writing, listening to music, cooking, starting with new recipes, crafting. It's never too late to start using your hands in your adulthood and coming up with more ideas after your 20s, right? Podcasting is something interesting that has taken up a lot of people's time in this new world of wanting to stay connected and finding that technology is starting to be a huge creative way for people to stay connected. And regular creative practices like this and other things are helping people cope with stronger sense of identity and belonging during these times. And the CDC is saying that this is because a lot of people are reporting more rituals in their lives that they're starting to lean towards after becoming a little bit more in tune with their mental health. So a lot of adults were doing this before reporting it, but volunteer shifts, we've seen a lot more happening with more people willing to shift up with a social mindset and show up and be representative to those who need resiliency. We're also starting to know that people are starting to report their walks, their check-ins, their shared meals, their mental health routines, their yoga, things like that. And that's super, super interesting to also see as well that people are they're more in tune with their mental health, but the reports are showing that there are a lot of coping strategies that have become a little bit more prevalent to discuss because adults are starting to need more of that. Now, just another angle to look at this for reframing age, right? As we get older, I think experience sharpens your discernment, right? And I think when it comes to setting boundaries, it makes you a lot more powerful with your values and how you are able to speak on your own values and how you are able to carry confidence in that aspect of things. We are animals, so we're designed to be social, and we're designed as animals to treat social time as a health time, right? So especially when it comes to wellness or when it comes to providing, when it comes to meals, that kind of thing. So, just and if you look at it from that angle, we can practice, just kind of averting isolation by becoming more in tune with who we are, but also becoming more productive individually. It doesn't make you less, extroverted or anything. It just means that you are able to get more energy from the things that you bring into your life. So just a quick data update. So adults with depression, we talked about 1 in 5 adults experience it based on what the CDC is saying. And we also know that the NHIS, right, is reporting that a lot of adults are starting to need more social connection because of the reliance on the internet and that kind of thing. Just to end things with a little bit more facts here, rural health facts from the HHS is basically stating that rural communities make up about 1/5 of the U.S. population, with about $16 billion in investments exceeding to straighten rural health, including $350 million for rural programs. Basically targeting the use, and these programs are targeting the use of opioids, small hospital support, telehealth expansion, and more workforce development. And that's what the HHS is reporting this year. They're also reporting from the HHS that there is going to be more telehealth flexibilities starting January 30th of 2026, allowing for more rural adults to access behavioral and non-behavioral health services from home without geographical restrictions. Now, there's been a lot of pushback from that because a lot of adults are not reporting that this is the case. We know that the Surgeon General is basically saying that they know that the rural residents and rural adults are basically saying that they are at higher risk for social disconnection. But he emphasized that there's more resiliency based on community infrastructure and more opportunities to buy locally and get more involved in your local networks. Obviously, we know that's going to be hard for those who are not accepted by their local communities. So I think speaking at it from that angle might be a little bit tone deaf, but that's what they're saying. Another thing that they are looking at doing in regards to telehealth, because this is how they're trying to, I guess, address some of the isolation in these communities, is that they are looking to build out more community-based programs, when in fact we know that that's not the case. We know that a lot of libraries and parks and volunteer groups are starting to not see as much funding as they used to. And we know that a lot of these programs and entities and organizations in themselves are actually being defunded to the point where they're actually being stopped. So the Federal Rural Action, as they call it, is plans to prioritize that and bring more of that back. I will believe it when I see it. But I want to talk a little bit more about what LGBTQ plus adults can look forward to. I know a lot of LGBTQ plus older adults need to know their rights, right? I feel like you need to know what that means in regards to making sure that your health is prioritized. And if you are being discriminated against, you have the ability to speak on that. And I think when it comes to being in communities where you're feeling isolated, there's a lot of resources that are out there that you could get a hold of. But most importantly, you could look at certain websites like the Trevor Project. You could also look at current information from the Surgeon General, but take the information lightly and do a little bit more research on what's available in your local community. But most importantly, what local LGBTQ voices are prominent and around you, and what social service agencies are around, and what space do they offer for you to come if they offer community spaces. Looking into those options would be great for isolation, or if you're feeling depressed or you want more opportunity to connect. I would say if faith is something that you prioritize, looking into that and making sure you are in a safe space when it comes to faith, because a lot of people use faith to harm groups of people. Just be mindful if that's happening, and sometimes you might have to venture off and create your own avenue of support. But, both rural and LGBTQ plus adults face structural barriers. But, finding your community, finding pets, going by your chosen family, and knowing your civil right protections is a huge thing to consider. Especially going into this time of the year where we rely a lot on our chosen families and that kind of thing. Thank you all for listening. I think this is all relevant information. I think as we get older, as I said earlier, your confidence gets better, but sometimes there's things that happen where you might feel a little bit to yourself. People obviously get older, people die, there's health things that come up that you don't have any control over. So feeling isolated can happen to anyone, and I want you all to know that you're not alone. Thanks for listening. Hello, tea sippers. Welcome in. Let's talk about the holidays again. So, this is my favorite time of the year. I've never been much of someone to ask for things, but I love to give, and my family usually comes together twice. So my dad's birthday is towards the end of December, so we usually come together with my nieces and nephews and siblings, and then we come back again for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So those gatherings are pretty much just what the season is for me, is driving to Illinois to see family, and also to celebrate birthdays and do gift exchanges and that kind of thing. So everyone has their own traditions, right? So growing up in the 90s and growing up in the early 2000s in the burbs, when I was younger, the holidays meant, traveling to Chicago every year. My family lived in the suburbs of Chicago, so way close to the border of Wisconsin. But we headed into the south and west side neighborhoods of Chicago every single year, and it was chaotic. Sometimes the traffic was ridiculous, and the weather, and other times, it was joyful. It was sometimes overwhelming to be around a lot of people. Growing up in our community, in our household, it was the six of us, and majority of our family lived in the Chicagoland area, and they saw each other more. We had some family that lived closer, but we would see each other sporadically a little bit more. But not as much as our extended relatives unless something was going on. But we would travel for Easter and that kind of thing. So back then, road trips were everything. It just seemed like a huge part of the holidays to me. Flying wasn't common for a lot of black families from what my vantage point and what I saw, because it was expensive and it was inaccessible. So cars gave a lot of us a lot of freedom to take those long commutes and become a part of the tradition. We would sometimes get family that would come from down south, right? That would come and see us. So, whether it was Christmas, Easter, family reunions, or whatever, the journey was always worth it because it was a huge part of the holiday experience. So, traveling and commuting again as an adult to go see family still feels like those traditions are still in place. So I love that. I love that part of it. And the holidays aren't just about Christmas, right? Hanukkah and Kwanzaa carry deep historical meaning. Kwanzaa isn't really anything. I think that was more of a Hallmark holiday, to be honest, that was created in the 70s. Because that's not really celebrated the way that we think it's celebrated in a lot of black communities here, at least here in the Midwest. Speaking from my own experience, you learn about it a lot in the burbs, right? They talk about Hanukkah and Kwanzaa as if they are very traditional and mainstream, which they are considered that. But, Kwanzaa isn't as celebrated as much as people make it seem. But Hanukkah, on the other hand, embodies that, and obviously Kwanzaa does too, but Hanukkah is more celebrated amongst those who are Jewish. And we know that tradition has been something that has been celebratory and lasting 8 days, and also highlights how people have created rituals together through religion or through culture, and how they embody resilience amongst themselves. So I find that interesting, and I find it interesting that regular conversations were had in school growing up about, the multiple holidays, and it just seemed a little bit more inclusive than a lot of people made it out to be. I know around that time as a kid in like 2004, I would say it would be my first understanding of the conversation of Happy Holidays versus Merry Christmas. That was talked about, but the conversations were usually always shut down in school, and we just kind of kept it cute with Happy Holidays, or some teachers kept it cute with Merry Christmas and just kept pushing. So I guess it just depended on, your teacher, depending on the school, but I feel like a lot of the culture wars when it comes to Christmas and it comes to the holidays is very, very self-inflicted by those who want to mean well and be inclusive, or not want the religion to be rained on or whatever. But in reality, it creates a lot more discourse or a lot more conflict amongst people who just celebrate the holidays because it's a pure magical time of the year and it makes them feel great, So, as a kid, Christmas was pure magic. So lights, right? Going around the neighborhood, seeing the lights, getting gifts or giving gifts, and the thrill of seeing cousins and other family members, aunts and uncles, and my grandparents. As an adult, I will say, although some of those traditions are similar, the meaning has shifted a little bit from that less pure magic feel to more of a connection feel, and more of a gratitude that my family is still connected feel. For the holidays, and less about the magic and the fantasy and the Santa Claus and all that kind of thing. Although I do still collect Black Santa Clauses. This is my theme for the past 3 or 4 years. 1, because they still are in great shape, and 2, because I am way too currently cheap to buy more decorations with the economy and the tariffs and how those prices have skyrocketed. But my plan is to shift to reindeer and snowmen in the future as decorations. So I feel like you can find those little things to put yourself in the Christmas spirit. So I guess some things I will say about getting yourself in a mood for the holiday is decorated, as I mentioned, but you can also create your own traditions now that you are an adult. One thing that I do a lot this time of the year is a lot of baking and a lot of soup making. So that kind of signals the holidays for us. Simply finding joy in just giving and shopping and creating gifts. Obviously, if things are too expensive this year, maybe pulling back and doing something a little bit more creative, like baking cookies for your relatives or coming up with goodie bags, things like that. One year we are going to do some volunteering. We maybe in a couple years. But right now it's a lot of baking and doing things on our own, driving through local Christmas light festivals and in our car and doing that whole thing and spending time with our pets. My husband doesn't really like the whole Hallmark part of Christmas just because he worked retail, so he was hear Christmas songs since maybe the 1st of November through New Year's, which is fine. I mean, I guess that's an excuse, but for me, I have to kind of find it upon myself to get immersed in Christmas. So I like to play some Christmas music when I can, especially while I'm cleaning or when I'm going for walks with the boys. I like to do the same thing. So there's ways that you can get yourself in the Christmas or holiday spirit. So I invite you to, reflect on your own evolving holiday traditions as an adult. And I'm curious to hear about what it looked like for you all, when you were younger. Did you travel by road? Did you travel by plane? Where did your relatives live? Did you have a big family? Did you have a small family? Did your family not celebrate the holidays? And if they didn't, what did this time of the year look like for you? A lot of people talk about bonfires and that kind of thing and getting the long breaks to see family. So at least that's part of it. And I also want to make sure I always mention the aspect of chosen family this time of the year, because I think what puts the pure magic in Christmas or the pure magic in the holidays is having the ability to be by those who love you for who you are and for everything you bring authentically. And I also think the joy of giving to other people who are in need, but most importantly, giving to others to show your love and appreciation for them is a huge reason for the season. So, again, my favorite time of the year. I love Christmas. I can't wait to do my Christmas shopping. I can't wait to switch up decorations next year. And I also can't wait to spend more time with family. I think, part of being an adult is starting to be more receptive to the fact that family loves you. And, you might go through hard times with people in your own journey of acceptance. But, still love and appreciate those who are still here, because you never know when the last day you are going to have with people is and when that will be. So, love you all. Thanks for listening. Welcome back to Clocked Out Reality and Pop Culture. This is your host, Mark Long, and I'm here to bring it to you. So let's go ahead and get into it. So I want to talk about Married to Medicine and the hot takes with that. So I hate to say it, Dr. Simone is not really the tea for me, but we'll get into that in a minute. So we're going to talk about Married to Medicine. We're going to talk about the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, Salt Lake City. We're going to dive into what's happening with the Yosephos and talk about more. Stay tuned. This is Clocked Out Reality. So Bravo Land is buzzing right now. So Jen Shah's countdown is real, right? She's going to be released in 2 days. So let's talk a little bit more about Jen Shah's release. So Jen Shah will be released on December 10th of 2025 after serving time for a telemarketing fraud scheme, right? And she basically blew it out of the water in terms of this crime. People killed themselves. There's a lot of people, there were older adults that were, clearly without money. So Bravo's impact on that. Andy Cohen has firmly said that she will not return to the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City for any Bravo show whatsoever. Now, what does that mean for Jen Shah? So rumors swirled that Jen Shah might be popping up on another gig. That's right. I don't know if NBC Universal is ready to clock with her yet, but maybe Dancing with the Stars at ABC. We know they had other criminals on the show, Anna Valdi, or whatever her name was. She was on, and Anna Delvey, I believe that's what her name was, and she was on for committing fraud as well, or she was on after committing fraud as well. So it's interesting how they're trying to do this rag to riches, or almost like from riches to rags to riches again for Jen Shah. So we'll see what happens with that. I know Bravoland is bracing for the headlines to happen. They want cameras to come back up like they did for Karen Huger, but we know that these crimes are not the same. A lot of people are saying that Jen Shah and should be treated as of any other housewife that was on the show, and we know that should not be the case because her crime is not the same as Wendy's crime with the fraud case and Karen Huger with the DUI and everything that's happening. So, I believe in redemption, but let's give Jen Shah a beat so she can really learn what she did was very criminal and something that was pretty much done mindfully. She was aware that she was taking this money from people. So anyway, Jen's going to be released in 2 days. I'm a little bit indifferent. Obviously, there's excitement as a Bravo-holic, but I am willing to go with the flow on that and see what happens and what unfolds. Let's dive quickly into Married to Medicine. So I want to get into Dr. Simone right now because she is not Miss Peacemaker the way that she wants to make it seem so. I think after watching the show for 12 seasons, I can see that Dr. Simone thought that she could be Peacemaker by being a little bit more, kind of like in charge of the girls and wanting to put Quad in her place all the time. But Quad is not here for that. And she's willing to let Simone know what time it is. She's like, Simone, please don't do that. Don't talk at me and don't point at me. Because I think Quad clocks that Simone comes off as condescending. And Simone doesn't like to be painted as that way. So I think that's why she really gets upset with Quad. And is honestly tired because we're in season 12 and that's what you're still fighting with her about, Simone. Like, let's pick a different focus. I feel like without Dr. Heavenly being on the show and with her son's arrest and how she's acting crazy about getting questioned about that. Ladies, you all have been on this show for 12 seasons. The accountability, the social media, all that stuff, all the questions have happened. You all have dipped your toes in running your mouth. So I feel like when questions come back at you, you can't get mad heavily at Toya for wanting to talk about it. This is what's all over the blogs, right? So let's talk about it. Let's be sisters and open a can. Since you like to talk about mortgages, and Toya isn't really like my favorite cast member on the show. Obviously I'm more of a Quad fan, Miss Quad, she got it. But I will say between Simone and Heavenly's confessions and the lack of accountability and the pointing of the fingers, I think these girls need to move on and get a new storyline. Because Heavenly, you're not exempt from questions. Simone, you're not exempt from wanting to understand why you come at Quad with so much vitriol. No one is exempt for anything. You have to answer to it. And I think the ladies are really bringing that. It's a little bit less drowsy now that Heavenly is back in the mix and we've been introduced to the new women. I don't think they're spicing things up the way Sweet Tea did, but we shall see. Dr. Jackie is being herself, coming in here with that condescending tone, talking about, are you aware that you have thyroid disease? Or do you have thyroid disease to that girl in front of everybody? Talk about how it looks enlarged. That's not cute. I understand you're a doctor and you're in a room full of medical professionals, but I believe people know how to check it and put it to the side as if we've learned something from what happened with Buffy, honey. So just want to clock that. Jackie and Simone, please get it together. I want to really, really enjoy Married to Medicine. I really want to. So let's keep it, in the words of Ashley, who I don't like to quote from Potomac, let's keep it a buck. All right. Now let's talk about Eddie and Wendy Osefo's court drama, right? From the Real Housewives of Potomac. So, charges. So, both were arrested in October, as I covered on the podcast. And basically, what they were arrested for was staging a burglary and filing false claims to their insurance company and racking up close to $500,000 in basically kickback. So, the update now is that they've requested to be tried together as co-defendants while the judge is approving this. So, I don't know what's going to come of that. Their next hearing is set for December 19th. And this storyline is obviously dominating in the Potomac streets, along with Karen's release. And Karen has already been interviewed by Andy, so we're going to see more of that later on in the season. But I don't know what's going to happen. A lot of what's happening with Wendy and what's happening with Eddie could kind of reshape their Bravo futures if the network decides to take a beat, or if they decide to not put this storyline on camera, or if they decide to not film because they are working through this serious fraud case. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Wendy and Eddie. I will say that Wendy is having a very good season on Potomac. Just saying. Fraud season, or fraud allegations aside, this is one of her best seasons. I will say I'm indifferent with Wendy, but I will say that her and Stacey are having a phenomenal season. Giselle is actually running the storyline through, whether you love or hate her. Ashley is doing what Ashley does. trying to pick a fight with the girls, just like when she brought Sesame Street onto the show to confront Candace as she fell flat because Sesame tried to make it seem like Chris was hitting on everybody at the bar, when in reality, take a picture of you and then put it next to Candace. No shade. But I just need these girls to bring it if they want to return. Kay and Angel, because I'm interested to see more Wendy and how this unfolds. She's already coming off as resilient. She showed up to BravoCon. I know that Stacey is just hands down the breakout star of season 10 of The Real Housewives of Potomac. Whether you love her or hate her, or whether you think her lies are too much, that QVC voice is hitting the TikTok and dominating Bravo talk all over the interwebs, and I am here for it. Stacey, you have a great personality. Keep letting the girls have it. Don't hold back. I hope some of these ladies have learned their lesson in regards to coming into a show and not being themselves fully, versus Stacey, who is showing up and being herself, lies and all. But she's showing up and bringing us Stacey full frontal with no apologies. Just saying. Versus Ashley is with this tired hazing of the new girls. This is Stacey's second season. Move on to a new girl. And it seems like you need to be having a conversation with Miss Angel, because Angel isn't bringing us nothing but this fake beef that she has with Wendy. And that's not something that I feel is relevant to what's happening, given that Wendy has actual story and a storyline behind Happy Eddie. And I think the girlies are just upset that Stacey found an opportunity to launch a business, and it's happening. GNA isn't doing that great. Okay, I haven't ordered my GNA hat or anything like, or GNA pants or whatever. Do they have things that are unisex? Do they have things that the gays would flock to and buy? Is it just shapewear for women? What is it? What is it given GNA? So I need Ashley to focus on that. I think Giselle is giving us story as she always does, because she showed up and she filmed with Monique, which was amazing. I will say something was a little bit weird how production edited that. I find it really odd that we saw less accountability from Giselle and more accountability from Monique. I think that's what they wanted the viewers to see, which is fine based on where things left off. But I want to see full accountability across the board. I think it's a separate conversation with Monique and Giselle than it is with Monique and Candace. I think Monique and Candace need to have their conversation about that. That's completely separate. If they want to have a conversation about that, if she returns to the show, or if Candace finds it in her to talk more about it on her podcast. I don't care. Violence isn't the answer. But I feel like when it comes to Giselle and Monique, I wanted to see more accountability actually from Giselle. Because Giselle, if she claims that she knows what Monique was going through the whole time, she should have been a little bit more of a friend to her. Unless Big Boy is doing this and Monique and her 4 homes and blah, blah, blah. Like, girl, if you think that your girl is going through it, go there and try to be, friendlier, so that she can open up to you and confide to you. But maybe Monique didn't need to be on the show for some time, because clearly she had a lot going on in her marriage and she wanted to work through that and get through that with her divorce. And that's okay too. I think that's perfectly fine. I think her return to the show is on time. It's been 5 years. The ladies sat down and had a great conversation. Obviously production left out a lot, but that's fine. Moving forward, keep bringing it to us, because I live for that Stacey and Tia fight. I like Tia. I just don't like what is this beef that you have with Stacey? And Stacey, what is this beef that you have with Tia? I just don't, when there's just two people who just don't get along. I think that's what happened with Stacey and Tia. I really like Tia because Tia also has a really, really, really great storyline. She has a vibrant personality. I think she fits in with the women really well. I don't know how she's going to fare with Karen, because I'm going to assume that Karen is going to return to the show. And I don't know how Tia is going to fare on the show long term. And I hope she doesn't get a weird, Robin edit. She's so concerned about where Stacey's man is, and we've seen her man in a couple scenes, but I want to see more between them too. What's up? I feel like I've seen a lot of Timo. I've seen enough. In the words of Kay, we've seen enough. But I'm curious. I feel like I'm liking this new season a lot. It's one of my favorite seasons of The Real Housewives, in general. But it's one of my favorite seasons of Potomac, because I like the fact that they picked up and kept the storyline going. Okay? So yeah, we'll see what happens with the Ocephals. And I want to move over into The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City and talk about the seating chart. And that's going to be my main focus. I don't want to talk about anything else until we get more episodes. But Bronwyn has first chair at the reunion. That's crazy. I'm really happy about that. And Lisa Barlow obviously has the other first seat, which is well deserved. Although I'm not the biggest Lisa Barlow fan, but her spot is earned in that seat because the ladies have come over her with fire all this time. It'll be interesting to see what Meredith brings to the reunion, given that Brahmin is now walking around telling people in interviews that Meredith didn't really bring much this season. So the show could pretty much do without her, and she claims that she was just saying what all the other girlies were saying in an interview that I clocked on TikTok or YouTube or wherever. So earned, I would say so. It signals that Brahmin's relevance this season is worth a conversation. It's also, signaling that there's a lot of reunion taping drama already. I think there's going to be a lot of tension. There might be a walk-off. We haven't seen a trailer. The ladies' outfits look... Some of them look nice. I wouldn't say that they look amazing. Like, no shade. They just don't look superb. The way they used to... Like, the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, the girlies used to come in and shut it down. This year, something is off. Like, none of the ladies look in unison. Maybe that's, like, a signal for how the season is. And, like, the toxicity and, like, the fact that the ladies are just trying to stand each other for one moment. Hopefully that's not the case, because I think things are starting to slowly end. Wait, that's the wrong Mormon show where the show was ending on a good note. No, and they also just had a reunion. So, I think there's something in the water in Utah. I think the ladies just like to come for each other, but at the end of the day, they love each other down, and they just have a sisterly, aggressively judgmental way of showing it. So we'll see. I'm really in tune, and we'll stay in the know on Potomac and Salt Lake as I watch another episode tonight, because they come on during the week. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And I'm sorry, but that premiere ate. There's been a lot of conversation about how the premiere did and how it was lackluster. We have our loyal Garcelle fans who are still pretending like they're not tuning in, when in reality they are tuning in because they're watching and commenting. I didn't really notice the difference. I think I see fresh energy with Rachel Zoe officially joining the cast for season 15 and making her return, and just kind of how she carried herself on that episode, just as Rachel Zoe, as we all remember her to be. She seems a little bit more sure of herself. She has a storyline with this divorce that's happening. She's friends with Kathy Hilton, which is an interesting way to bring her into the show. Her influence is in fashion, so she's a fashion powerhouse, and we all know that. And her presence just elevates this glam, this fresh energy, and this couture credibility where she can kind of speak on things of that nature, because she's been in the industry she's been in the industry for a while, but she's been on Bravo and in the Hollywood industry since before her show and during her show, where that 2000s fashion era was really in its prime, where we saw a lot of the red carpets with the denim and the new fashion takes with the hairstyles and the layers of clothing, and we know that Rachel Zoe was a huge part of that. So I think she's just bringing new energy into Beverly Hills. I think Rachel Zoe is not willing to sit back there and pretend like she's not reading the news, child. She sat there and she was like, wait, Kyle, I think your husband was trying to get at me, baby. And then she looked over to she didn't look over to Dorit. And this isn't in the sequence of which she said it, by the way. But she also inserted herself in regards to PK and him being out in the street kissing all on these women. How does that make you feel? That's not cute. And I live for her, because she's also going through a divorce, so she knows what that means to talk about these men and put them in their place. And my husband said that he read something about her calling up Andy and wanting to get on the show because, one, she's back and she's Rachel Zoe and she's doing her thing, but she doesn't want to be tied down by that man. She's going to do whatever she wants to do, and she's getting a divorce, and here's what's happening in her life. And I live for that. That's how you carry yourself and be a businesswoman, and that's how you lean into reality TV. She knows what sells. She knows what's going to give. And hopefully the new girl, Amanda, gives us the same amount of energy. We'll get to meet her this week. And yeah, I hear that she's rich too, and that she's putting the ladies on their toes. So it'll be interesting to see what that unfolds to. Thanks for listening to some reality TV drama, and I'm going to continue to bring it to you because that's what I do. Hello, and welcome back to Clock the Tea with Dr. Long. This is your host, Mark Long. I am back to go ahead and clock some of that political tea and also give you a little bit of news on the side. Go ahead and get your tea, your Crystal Light, your coffee, or whatever have you, and take a sip with me. Okay, so to start, Let's go ahead and talk about Jasmine Crockett. She recently just filed to run for U.S. Senate in Texas on December 8th of 2025, which is going to shake up the Democratic primary quite a bit. Colin Arad is excited, who is also in the race, and it announced the same day, while James Tallarico remains in the field. So now let's look at this as a whole, because Jasmine Crockett is running in a red state. And this isn't the first time, obviously a Democrat has ran in a red state. But the significance of her running in Texas is that Trump has had a huge stronghold on Texas for the past decade and some years. Now, her tone, just to talk about what she is saying that Donald Trump has pretty much already provided her a platform by throwing insults at her. And in her launch, she remains framed with direct quotes from Trump to launch her campaign for the Senate seat. Let's go ahead and take a listen really quick.
How about this new one they have? Their new star, Crockett. How about her? She's the new star of the Democrat Party, Jasmine Crockett. They're in big trouble. But you have this woman, Crockett. She's a very low IQ person. I watched her speak the other day. She's definitely a low IQ person. Crockett. Oh, man. She's a very low IQ person. Somebody said the other day she's one of the leaders of the party. I said, you got to be kidding. Now they're going to rely on Crockett. Crockett's going to bring them back.
I just think it was just completely captivating, because not only did she not talk about the issues right away, which I think was a strategic move, I think what she is doing is building a brand so that she can be ready to fire against Donald Trump, since Donald Trump's name has been constantly her name has been constantly in Donald Trump's mouth. And why it matters, I think Democrats see this as a potential opening, basically banking on the backlash that Trump has already provided. And who knows where this is going to go. I feel like a lot of people are banking on the backlash in regards to just how the state of the economy is. I know there's a lot of concern in Texas about that. We saw a lot of impact and blowback based on the current issues with the Republican Party dropping the ball several times within the state, but also across the nation. So it'll be interesting to see how this campaign unfolds for her. I'm also curious to see what her platform will be, because we know that she's very, very outspoken. She's obviously a person of color, which puts her at an advantage in some lanes, because I feel like with her being a person of color and being someone that's also outspoken, she's able to speak from certain experiences that people in her district have informed her of, but most importantly, her own experiences growing up in where she grew up, but also being professionally involved in this political discourse in her state. So let's just stay in tune and let's see how this unfolds. That means, there's going to be more checks and balances if she wins her election when it comes to Donald Trump, which the rumor on the street right now is that Democrats are going to swing back with a huge blue wave come 2026. Now, let's do a quick check-in on the economy. So the economy is not that great. And are red states turning on Trump? So there's been a lot of talk about shifts in political mood, and a lot of analysis indicates that Trump's support has eroded among his key 2024 groups, such as Hispanics, independents, and young adults. And that has been very, very consistent through late 2025, which complicates a lot of GOP midterm prospects and signaling a lot of potential fatigue where economic outcomes basically diverge from promises. And there's a lot of updates about this in regards to why these conclusions have come into place. And a lot of what people are saying is that the approval of Trump's presidency has fallen 8 points, which is about 42.4%, while his disapproval rating has risen by 10 points, 54.9%. So the decline seems to be pretty much getting hijacked. Nearly half of the 12-point approval gap has opened up, and that's just since October. And this comes from Brookings Brookings.edu. And there's also some talk here that there's a lot happening in regards to the passing of major tax legislation, which And there's also some talk about the ending of the war between Israel and Hamas and the slowing illegal border crossings and that kind of thing. And people think that that is a huge political success. But in regards to the economy, the president's focus has not been quite where a lot of Americans and a lot of people want it to be in regards to the issue of inflation, jobs. There's a lot of issues with Gen Zs in the job market right now. And obviously healthcare, which is a top concerns for a lot of Americans right now. We see a lot happening, obviously, with immigration and with crime and taxes and government spending. And we don't see a lot of action other than a lot of push to assert dominance over marginalized groups and populations to make it a point that America comes first, when in reality, we see that there has been a conflict with America coming first, with Marjorie Taylor Greene last week suggesting that the president's focus is actually overseas. Now, looking further into what's going on here with the economy, some fiscal realities and some rhetoric around that basically highlights that blue states contribute more in federal taxes while red states receive more in spending. So a lot of undercutting of red state advantage when there's a Republican in office, which kind of makes it seem that the economy is doing fabulous, right? According to a lot of red state officials, because in reality, that's how that usually pans out. Now, looking further, we see that there are some finance world takes that still tout the red states' growth and investment inflows in 2025 are actually reflective on what voters are pushing for, which is kind of interesting given the recent information that has come out. Okay, so why do red states hold a structural advantage in 2025? And I can just tell you a little bit more about that. So job creation. If there's more spending, there's more opportunity for jobs. So industries like defense or construction and aerospace, if the more spending is going there, there's going to be more job creation. If the population is growing because people are moving to these locations due to the increase in work and and obviously the financial respect that they have in regards to people relocating there and wanting to make sure that people's incomes match that ability for them to relocate and also, you know, pay their bills and make a decent wage as a double income household. Some economic policy stability in red states, when there is a Republican in office, means lower taxes, right? So income tax, business tax, estate tax burdens are constantly lighter in red states, and we see those numbers are quite accurate given with the current administration, which is no surprise to a lot of us. We know that some states are going to do much better in this economy and some states are not, but it's kind of interesting if we look back at what's happening with blue states in the country, and we see that blue states are kind of bailing out the red states right now, where there's a lot of talk that red states are pretty much getting the funding, blue states are the ones that are kind of putting the funds in place, right, in regards to make this happen. And we know that to be true because Democrats are pretty much dependent about their dependence on federal dollars. And a quick look into this is, for example, and this is from Time Magazine, where they talked about federal dollars to New York, basically representing its state budget from 2022. And we see that 38% of its budget was the state and not federal. And in Texas in 2022, we see that they have that same population growth, but they received even more, so about 40% in regards to state funds, in regards to federal funding. So that's quite interesting if we look at that. And we're going to continue to follow a little bit more of that information as well. Medicaid programs are covered by federal programs, so we see blue states typically have those huge metropolitan cities, so a lot of spending happens there, meaning that there will be less in respect back to those who are not paying into these benefits. So after researchers pretty much analyzed this during the Biden era, what they basically found was that all 50 states, federal revenue across all 50 states, is clear that blue states are funded. That blue states are funding red states based on the infrastructure, based on Medicaid and Medicare, the military spending, government contracts, standard grants, etc., and how state by state the inflows and outflows of federal funds are pretty much trickling in to these blue states to help out what these red states have going on. Some more information to highlight that. I feel like we just have to stay in the know. If you live in a larger area, you're gonna notice a lot of price hikes, as if we haven't noticed those before. Gas prices typically come down around this time of the year because of the offset of us spending overseas and what that looks like for the demand here. And right now we see that the demand is low, which is not great for gasoline right now. Now let's move over into another topic. I want to talk about the Epstein Files release and what that's going to look like and what new information has come up since then. A federal judge by the name of Paul Engelmeyer ordered the release of a grand jury's transcripts and exhibits from the from Ghislaine Maxwell case with protections to prevent identifying victims, accelerating public access to core materials. Now, this comes from USA Today. And furthermore information, let's look a little bit more into this Giselle, or what's her name? Ghislaine Maxwell. Let's look a little bit more further into this. So basically what it's saying is that the Epstein victims fought for years to release more information about this case, basically determine whether his rich and powerful acquaintances had previously discouraged his investigation or if they helped with his alleged trafficking. So that's pretty much what the conversation is right now. And the order was this order that was similar to the one on December 5th by a federal judge in Florida. And the U.S. District Attorney Judge Rodney Smith ordered the release of a grand jury transcripts from the abandoned investigation of Epstein in 2005 to 2009. So there's been a pattern here, if you all haven't noticed, that there's slowly starting to okay the release of these files from courts on a state, from federal courts. From federal judges within these states. So it'll be interesting to see what happens from there. What we know is that the public has a huge appetite for this right now based on the fact that there were thousands of victims and girls that were molested. And that there's likely photos and bank records from JP Morgan and another bank. So we need transparency from these big corporations as well. So that's why this is becoming as big as it is, because there's a lot that's happening behind the scenes that has happened or that we don't really know about. So we'll stay in the know about that, and I'll keep bringing you more information as we learn more about the Epstein files. But it's starting to look like more information is starting to come out, just as we thought. So in regards to another issue, so marijuana reclassification updates. The rescheduling status on that is basically in full force. We know we're seeing that the DEA is scheduling this rescheduling status, as I mentioned, considering HHS and DOJ recommendations to move cannabis from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3. The hearings pretty much opened and then were postponed this year, extending to some uncertainty for businesses and researchers. So what does Schedule 3 mean, right? Rescheduling to Schedule 3 could ease research barriers and potentially alleviate some tax burdens tied to the IRC, though significant federal controls would remain. So full descheduling of proposals, so like more to come and that kind of thing from the MORE Act and everything that was mentioned previously, have been continued to circulate in Congress this year. So the political posture from the president and the current administration is that they publicly revisited this conversation with cannabis policy, signaling that they're openness to reclassification or the reclassification of the drug, while also leaving some timelines and some scopes ambiguous and open. And that is interesting approach to this topic, because you can tell they don't want to get too political on that, because there are a lot of people that are both Republican and Democrat or independent, or are just people that dabble in the use of legal cannabis. So we know that there's a lot happening behind the scenes there. But what does this mean for marijuana advocacy groups? So a lot of advocacy groups have long pushed for federal government to basically soften a stance around this. And Trump appeared open to this relaxation when he was running for president, not only in his approach, but also on his social media platform by mentioning things like focus on research to unlock the medical uses of marijuana to a Schedule 3 drug several times. So now, what do we know that's happening in multiple states? The medical use of marijuana is already allowed in 40 states across the country. and the District of Columbia. So over the past dozen years, the number of jurisdictions of legalization of recreational marijuana use for adults has grown rapidly, right? And we know that has happened in 24 states and in the District of Columbia. But the movement has recently faced some setbacks. We know that Idaho lawmakers this year referred a proposed constitutional amendment to allow the ballot to forbid citizens and initiatives to legalize marijuana, and instead just to leave the decisions only to the legislator, while ballot measures to legalize the recreational use of marijuana in places like Florida, South Dakota, and in North Dakota, basically have said that there isn't really a need for that, is what a lot of people are saying, and a lot of what the measures have been. Florida, let's talk about Florida's measure to receive a majority vote. All the ballots are pretty much saying that the recreational marijuana had failed in each of these states, and that it fell like way below the 60% threshold needed to approve the amendment. So there's a lot happening here, and there's a lot of states that are pretty much very much against the recreational use of it. We know that 64 million Americans aged 12 and older, or 22.3% of people, have used marijuana during the past year, and yes, 12. And we also know from, and this is from the national survey that was released from 2024 by the Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So let's just keep going with information, and I'm going to keep bringing you all more information as it moves. It looks like the country is going to move in a direction to legalize marijuana. It's just a means of what that will look like. It might be medical first, and we might see more relaxation of recreational usage. And some states might move to legalize the drug. For example, maybe Wisconsin or places like that are near blue states might move to do more legalization for more economic purposes to help their economy. So we'll see what happens. Okay, moving on into another topic. So Luigi Mangione. Oh gosh. So there's a lot happening here, and basically what is being said, the police are saying that the reason why Luigi's backpack was searched, and just to give a little bit of background information on that, Luigi Mangione and his legal team are basically saying that his backpack was illegally searched, and there's now a debate over needing a warrant. And current testimony from officers say that they feared that there was a potential bomb or something along the lines of that, ammunition or anything loaded in the backpack. So that was their fear, and they said they wanted to search it based on that. Now, mind you, this was all done in a McDonald's lobby, I believe. So the case, what's happening with the case is that right now they're looking for some pretrial evidence that was recently released. We know that in Pennsylvania, there is a search where a lot of items were shown. A lot of suspicious items were shown in the media, and that was from that alleged illegal search. Now, proceedings have examined while Pennsylvania and New York standards govern the search and seizure issues for their own, how they do that on their own. There's a lot of reflection happening about the cross-state legal complexity of this case, so expect a little bit more to come out about that. My opinion, you shouldn't kill anyone. Obviously, that's against the law. You should pay your crime. However, if his legal team is working to reduce some of what's happening, or they're going through all these pre-trials, there must be a lot of damning evidence against him where they feel that they do have to do what they need to do by looking at body cam capturing and how the process unfolded. So we will stay looking at that, and I will keep you updated if more comes out. So, some current must-watches and ratings buzz. We see that Welcome to Derry, which I just started watching last week, and it's terrific. It is really, really, really creepy and scary. I almost didn't watch it because I don't like the idea of like harming children in any fashion or form. However, because I saw the two movies, I wanted to keep watching, and it got better. And from what they're saying is that 5.7 million viewers in the first 3 days, and now has grown to 620 million streaming minutes in its first full week. That is insane. So it's doing really well. So check that one out. Some engagement metrics, what they're saying is that is one of the top online ranked premieres of all time, also signaling a durable audience interest in this new horror horror prequel to film. So we're likely gonna get to see a season again happen. So check out Welcome to Derry. That's my little news update for you about some current watches for you, and I'll continue to do that every week as I discover new shows or documentaries that I'm interested in, and I would just talk about it on the podcast. Thank you all for listening to Clock That News and Political Tea.